The wind cut through my jacket like tiny blades, and the rain felt like it was deliberately chasing me down that morning. It was still dark when I stepped off the bus half a mile from the office building where I worked as a janitor. My sneakers were soaked by the time I reached the parking lot, and the industrial district smelled faintly of metal and wet asphalt. I kept telling myself it was worth it because it had to be. I wasn't supposed to be here, not at this point in life. I used to believe I'd be someone else by now, maybe a teacher, maybe even a chef, but life had other plans. Instead, I held a worn-out cleaning cart and a pair of gloves that smelled faintly of bleach. Still, I couldn't complain too much. The pay was steady, the hours quiet, and for a single mom with no one to lean on, it was something close to stability. The building loomed ahead, all cold glass and steel. I punched in the code at the service entrance and stepped into the silence. No chatter, no coffee machines humming yet. Just the faint echo of my own footsteps. I preferred it that way. No curious stares, no half-polite nods from people who thought janitors were invisible, or worse, a nuisance. This wasn't my first cleaning job. I used to work at a mall, scrubbing the same floor over and over, only for someone to walk across with muddy shoes and pretend not to notice. Some even tossed trash on purpose, laughing as if I were part of the scenery. I'd go home with aching arms and a smile plastered on my face for my daughter's sake, because Emily didn't need to know how cruel the world could be. Emily, just thinking of her warmed me. 10 years old, top of her class, curious about everything. She liked to help me at home, folding laundry in crooked piles and stirring pancake batter with an expression of deep focus, as if it were rocket science. She was why I got up at 4:30 every morning, why I dragged my body through cold and rain, because she deserved better than what I had growing up. See, I never had anyone. No mom to call for advice, no dad to lean on. My earliest memories are fragmented like broken film reels. Faces without names. A man's voice, warm but distant, handing me a necklace shaped like a little silver key, and then nothing. Just years of bouncing through foster homes, learning early how not to get attached. When I turned 18, they handed me a cheap apartment key and a pamphlet about opportunities for youth aging out of care. That was it. No family, no history, just me. I looked at the key-shaped pendant resting against my collarbone now, the same one from that vague memory. I never took it off. It was the only piece of my past I had, though I didn't know why I clung to it so much. Maybe because it proved someone once cared, or at least pretended to. The clock on the wall read 5:20 a.m. I had 40 minutes before employees started filing in, sipping coffee from overpriced cafes and tapping away on sleek tablets. I gripped the mop handle tighter and got to work. Soap, water, wipe, repeat. Some mornings, it felt like the floor gleamed brighter than my future, but I couldn't afford to think that way. Emily needed me to keep going, and for her I would. Every single day, even on mornings like this, when the wind felt like punishment and my bones ached from the cold, I told myself, just push through one more hour, one more day, one more paycheck. Because as long as I kept moving, she would never know what it felt like to be truly alone. People often say childhood shapes you, but mine felt more like something I survived rather than lived. My earliest memory is of a train station, the smell of iron and oil in the air and cold concrete under my shoes. I was 3, maybe younger. I don't remember who I was with. I don't remember why I was there. What I do remember is the fear and a necklace. A man's voice, warm and soft, telling me to be brave as he fastened the silver key around my neck. I never saw his face clearly. It was like a scene from a dream, blurry around the edges. And then it was gone, like someone hit the pause button on my life and restarted it somewhere else entirely. They told me later I had been abandoned. That's the word they used, abandoned. No note, no explanation. Just a little girl with no name but Grace muttered over and over through tears, clutching a necklace too big for her neck. I grew up bouncing through foster homes, some kind, some cruel, all temporary. In some homes, I was the extra mouth to feed, the one who had to earn her keep by doing chores while the other kids got to play. In others, I was invisible, just another case file waiting to age out. I learned quickly to pack light and not get too attached. Every move meant leaving behind something. Sometimes toys, sometimes people, sometimes even pieces of myself. School wasn't much easier. Kids notice when you're different. They see the thrift store clothes, the hand-me-down shoes, the lunches with generic peanut butter. I was that foster kid. Some were curious, others cruel. I became good at fading into the background, keeping my head down, surviving. Still, there were moments, little sparks of something that kept me from breaking entirely. One foster mom taught me how to braid hair and told me it made me look like I belonged somewhere. A teacher gave me a used journal and said I had a way with words. And always there was the necklace. I kept it close, sleeping with it pressed in my small hand like a talisman. I used to imagine it was from someone who loved me once, a father, an uncle, maybe even a stranger who couldn't keep me but wanted me to remember I mattered. In my loneliest nights, I would grip that necklace and whisper, "Someone out there wanted me once. Maybe they still do." But as the years passed and no one came looking, hope thinned out like old paint. By the time I turned 15, I stopped checking visitor lists on holidays, stopped wondering if my family would appear. I told myself family wasn't real, not for people like me. At 18, they handed me a small key to a one-bedroom apartment and a thin envelope of state documents. Birth certificate, social security, a few case notes. "Good luck out there," they said. Just like that, I was alone. No safety net, no family dinners, no one to call when life got heavy. I got a part-time job cleaning apartments and tried to enroll in community college. But money disappeared fast. Rent, food, bus fare, everything stacked against me. Then came him, Emily's father. He was charming, said all the right things, made me feel like maybe I could be more than the girl who'd been left behind. But I was wrong. That, of course, is another story, one that would shape the next decade of my life. For now, all you need to know is that by 19, I was pregnant, alone, and desperately trying to figure out how to be the kind of mother I'd never had. And through it all, the necklace stayed on my neck. I didn't know who gave it to me or why, but I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't lose it. Not ever. Because deep down, a part of me believed it was the only proof I'd once belonged to someone, and that maybe, just maybe, someone out there still loved me. He came into my life like a warm breeze on a cold day, and at first, I let myself believe he was different. His name was Ryan. He was funny, easygoing, and looked at me like I wasn't just another girl trying to scrape by. After years of feeling invisible, that kind of attention felt dangerous, and I didn't care. We met at a small diner near my apartment. I was waitressing part-time to keep the bills paid while still clinging to my dream of finishing school. Ryan was a regular, the kind of customer who always left a big tip and a wink on his way out. One night, he asked me to sit down for a cup of coffee after my shift. I should have said no. I knew better than to trust easily, but loneliness has a way of softening your judgment. We started dating, and for the first time, I thought maybe life was going to change. He talked about building a future together, how he admired my work ethic and thought I was different from other girls. For someone who had been abandoned at 3 and shuffled through foster homes, hearing someone say you're special, it's intoxicating. 3 months later, I was pregnant. When I told him, I expected shock, maybe fear, but I didn't expect betrayal. Ryan's face changed instantly. "You have to take care of it," he said flatly, like it was a business transaction. "Take care of it." I asked, stunned. "Grace, we're too young. I'm not ready for a family. We can't do this right now. You know what I mean, get it handled." My stomach twisted. I told him I wasn't going to end the pregnancy, that I wanted this baby, even if I had to do it alone. His expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Cold, detached, almost angry. "Fine," he said, grabbing his jacket. "But don't expect me to stick around for this mistake." That was the last night he slept at my place. He came back a few times after that, trying to convince me, sometimes begging, other times threatening. One night, he even slammed his hand on the kitchen counter, so hard Emily, still growing inside me, kicked in fright. That was the moment I locked the door and never let him in again. I wish I could say that was the hardest part, but pregnancy alone at 19 is its own battlefield. I worked until my ankles swelled, took night classes when I could, and cried into cheap ramen more times than I can count. Every doctor's appointment I walked into alone. Every baby item I bought secondhand because I couldn't afford new. But when Emily was born, everything changed. She came into the world on a chilly March morning, her tiny cry slicing through the sterile air of the hospital room. When the nurse placed her in my arms, I knew two things. I would never feel alone again, and I would never let her feel unwanted the way I had. From that day forward, love became my fuel. I took every extra shift, scrubbed floors until my hands cracked, anything to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Dating, romance, those things didn't exist for me anymore. I couldn't risk letting another Ryan into our lives. Sometimes I'd catch myself looking in the mirror late at night, dark circles under my eyes, aching all over, and whisper, "This isn't forever. Just hold on." And somehow I always did. The world had taught me early that people leave, that even those who say they love you can change their mind when life gets hard. So I stopped expecting anyone to save me. I'd save myself, and I'd save Emily no matter what it took. Still, there were nights when I lay in bed, my daughter's soft breathing next to me, and my fingers would trace that old necklace, the silver key from a past I couldn't remember. And I'd wonder, just for a second, who gave this to me? Did they leave me, or were they taken from me? I had no idea how close I was to finding out. Back then, Thomas Miller was just a name on the side of a truck to me. I'd seen his company logo on construction sites and billboards, but he was one of those people you imagine living in a completely different world. Wealth, success, the kind of life I could only clean up after. I didn't know his story, not yet. Thomas grew up in a small Oregon town, son of a factory worker and a schoolteacher. He wasn't handed his success. He built it brick by brick through years of long shifts and weekend classes in engineering. He married young to a woman named Laura, and by 26 they had a daughter named Julia, his entire world. That little girl changed everything for him. He talked about it later, how holding his newborn daughter felt like his heart had been placed outside his chest. He built tree houses, took her on nature walks, and spent Sunday mornings making blueberry pancakes shaped like animals because she loved it when breakfast smiled back. Life was simple but full, until one spring afternoon when everything collapsed. It was supposed to be a father-daughter outing, nothing special, just a ride on one of those scenic trains to a nearby lake. Thomas remembered every detail: the smell of pine, the rhythm of the train, the way Julia fell asleep against his arm. He stepped away for only a minute to grab a coffee from the dining car, leaving her curled up on the seat, and when he returned, she was gone. At first, he thought she'd simply wandered down the aisle. He called her name, searched every compartment, but panic clawed its way up his throat as minutes stretched into an hour. The train staff stopped everything. Security swept through. Police were called. Someone thought they saw a woman carrying a small child near the station, but by the time authorities arrived, there was nothing. No Julia, no woman, no trace. Thomas never forgave himself. The search lasted months, plastering Julia's face on every telephone pole, every news broadcast. Tips came in, but they were all dead ends. His wife, Laura, spiraled into grief, and their marriage didn't survive the weight of that loss. Eventually, she left town, unable to bear the memories of the daughter they'd lost. Thomas could have given up too, but he didn't. For years, he carried the guilt like an anchor and drowned it in alcohol. He said once that he drank not to forget, but to punish himself, every burning swallow a reminder of what he'd failed to protect. And then one winter morning, he woke up on the floor of his own office, surrounded by half-empty bottles, and realized he either had to change or die. So he changed. He quit drinking, threw himself into his construction business, and it exploded in success. He hired the best crews, earned contracts all over Oregon, and within a decade he was one of the most respected builders in the state. But Thomas didn't stop there. He poured money into children's charities and orphanages, quietly sponsoring programs to keep kids out of the kind of limbo Julia might have ended up in. He never said it outright, but people knew it was penance. He eventually remarried a kind woman named Clara, and together they had 2 kids, Timothy and Vanessa. They lived in a beautiful home overlooking Willamette Valley, the kind of place people put on postcards. Outwardly, he looked like a man who had rebuilt his life completely. But inside, there was still a room in his heart that never healed, a door forever half open, waiting for the day his little girl might walk back through it. He kept one thing from that day on the train, the necklace he'd given her for her 3rd birthday, a small silver key. It had been custom-made, engraved with her initials. He used to joke that she was his greatest treasure, and the key was just in case she ever needed to unlock Dad's heart again. For 26 years, he carried that memory and the ache of what if. He tried everything, private investigators, missing person databases, DNA registries, but nothing. Eventually, even the tips stopped. People told him to let go, to move on. But how do you move on when a part of your soul is missing? And then one cold October morning, he walked into his office earlier than usual and saw me. I didn't know it yet, but in that moment, mop in hand, hair tied back, wearing an old hoodie, and my necklace resting against my collarbone, Thomas Miller's world tilted on its axis. That morning was no different from any other. I was halfway through wiping down the lobby floor when I heard the sound of polished shoes on marble. Nobody usually came in that early, so I straightened up expecting security. Instead, a tall man in a dark coat walked in, shaking off the drizzle from outside. He had that effortless confidence of someone who belonged in buildings like this, someone used to doors opening automatically for him. I recognized his face instantly, Thomas Miller. His picture was on half the company brochures I'd cleaned off coffee tables. "Morning," he said, his voice deep but calm. "Morning," I replied, gripping the mop handle a little tighter. I wasn't used to being noticed, not by people like him. He nodded politely and moved toward the elevators, but halfway there he stopped. His eyes dropped to my chest. No, not like that. He was staring at my necklace. "That pendant," he said quietly. "Where did you get it?" My fingers instinctively went to the small silver key that always rested just above my collarbone. "I've had it for as long as I can remember," I said, confused by his sudden interest. Something flickered across his face. Shock. Then something softer, like pain. He stepped closer, his voice careful. "Who gave it to you?" I don't know. It's from when I was a kid." "Why?" He hesitated, studying me like I was a photograph he'd lost decades ago. "It looks exactly like one I had made for my daughter." His voice caught slightly on that last word, and for a second I saw something raw in his eyes. I didn't know what to say. People don't usually connect janitors and CEOs over sentimental jewelry. I forced a small laugh. "Well, guess keys are popular shapes, right?" But he didn't laugh. "Does it have any markings?" I hesitated, then flipped the key over. Tiny, almost invisible initials were engraved on the back, JM. I'd always assumed they were decorative. Thomas's face drained of color. "Those are my daughter's initials," he whispered. The room seemed to still. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the pounding of my heart. "I think there's some mistake," I said quickly, stepping back. "I grew up in foster care. I don't know who my parents were. It's just something I've always had." But he didn't look convinced. In fact, he looked like a man standing on the edge of something life-altering. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Grace," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "Grace Miller." His breath caught. "Miller, you kept the name?" "What?" I frowned. "No, that's just a coincidence. Miller is common. It doesn't mean anything." He looked like he wanted to say more, but the elevator chimed, breaking the strange silence. He straightened, but his eyes never left me. I'm sorry, he said finally. I didn't mean to upset you. It's just that necklace. It's exactly like one I gave my daughter. She was 3 when he stopped, shook his head. Never mind. Have a good day, Grace. And just like that, he was gone, leaving me standing there gripping the mop like a lifeline. The rest of my shift, I couldn't stop touching the necklace. I'd always felt connected to it, but now? Now I couldn't shake his expression, that mix of recognition and grief. It shouldn't have mattered. I didn't know him, and I certainly wasn't his daughter. My life was simple, ordinary, and I liked it that way. But when I got home that evening, Emily noticed me staring at it and asked, "Mom, why do you look sad?" I smiled and kissed her forehead. "I'm not sad, sweetie, just thinking." What I didn't tell her was that Thomas Miller's eyes had unsettled something deep inside me. For the first time in years, I wondered if the past I'd tried so hard to forget was about to come rushing back. For the next week, I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just an odd coincidence. A key-shaped pendant, some initials, a man with a tragic past who saw what he wanted to see. That's all. People project their pain onto strangers all the time, right? But Thomas Miller didn't let it go. 2 days after that morning, I found him waiting by the service entrance as I arrived for work. He was holding a coffee cup and wearing an expression I couldn't read. Half hopeful, half terrified. "Grace," he said, like we were already familiar. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" I stiffened. "Mr. Miller, I really need to start my shift." "It's important," he said gently. "It's about that necklace." Something in his voice stopped me. Maybe it was the weight behind it, like this wasn't just curiosity, it was desperation. So I nodded, leaning against the wall as he spoke. "My daughter disappeared 26 years ago," he began, voice low. "She was 3 years old. That necklace, you're wearing the exact one I had made for her birthday." I stared at him, heart thudding. "That's awful. I'm sorry for your loss, but I grew up in foster care. No one ever came looking for me. I don't think I'm who you think I am." He didn't argue, just nodded slowly. "I know how it sounds. But please, would you consider a DNA test? Just to be sure." I laughed nervously. "That's a lot. You don't even know me." His eyes softened. "Grace, I know I'm asking for something huge, but if there's even a small chance, I've been waiting half my life for her to come home. If I'm wrong, I'll apologize and never bother you again." I wanted to say no. My life was finally stable, even if it was hard. I had Emily, I had work. I didn't need old ghosts dragging me backward. But Emily's face flashed in my mind. How she sometimes asked why she didn't have grandparents, why family trees at school were awkward for us. So I said yes. The test was quick, painless, and terrifying. A simple swab of the cheek, a signature on a consent form, and then waiting. I tried to act like it didn't matter, like it would come back negative and life would go on. But the moment the lab called, Thomas insisted on being there when I opened the email. We sat across from each other in a small coffee shop, the kind with creaky wooden chairs and a smell of burnt espresso. My hands shook as I tapped the link. The screen loaded, and the words hit me like a punch. Parent/child match. 99.98% probability. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "This can't be real," I whispered. Thomas reached across the table, his hand trembling. "Grace, it's you. You're my daughter." I stared at him, throat tight, unable to speak. All I could think about were the years I'd spent believing I was unwanted, that nobody cared enough to keep me. Now here was this man, tears in his eyes, looking at me like I was the answer to a prayer he'd whispered for decades. But part of me recoiled. If I was your daughter, why did I grow up alone? Why didn't you find me sooner? His face crumpled. "I tried, Grace. God, I tried. I searched every day, every year. But whoever took you, they vanished. There was nothing to go on. I thought you were gone forever." I wanted to believe him, but pain has a way of building walls. I pulled back, shaking my head. "I don't know what to do with this." Thomas nodded slowly, tears spilling over. I'm not asking for everything today. Just let me know you're willing to talk. Please. I left the cafe in a haze, clutching the necklace. For years, I'd worn it as proof someone once cared. Now I knew who. And instead of feeling relief, I felt conflicted. Angry at fate. Angry at whoever took me. Angry that I'd grown up without knowing any of this. When I got home, Emily ran into my arms. Mom, you're late. I hugged her tighter than usual, burying my face in her hair. I didn't tell her yet. I couldn't, because for the first time in my life, my past wasn't a mystery anymore, it was real. And I wasn't sure I was ready to face it. I thought knowing the truth would make me feel whole, but instead it cracked me open. For days I kept replaying Thomas's words, "You're my daughter." I never stopped looking. It should have felt like closure, like finally finding the missing piece of my life, but all I could think about was every foster home, every Christmas spent alone, every birthday candle I'd blown out wishing for a family that never came. I didn't answer his calls at first, not because I hated him, but because I didn't know how to feel. Grief and joy don't mix easily, they tangle, pulling you in opposite directions. I needed space, but Thomas didn't give up. One evening, there was a soft knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find him standing there, holding a box. His hands shook slightly, like he wasn't sure I'd let him in. "I'm sorry for showing up," he said gently, "but I thought you might want this." He handed me the box, then stepped back, waiting. Inside was a photo album. The first picture was of a little girl with wide eyes and pigtails, wearing the exact same necklace I still wore. My breath caught. "That's me," Thomas nodded, his voice breaking. "From your 3rd birthday. That was the last day we were together." I sat down on the couch, staring at the photos, Christmas mornings, trips to the park, messy pancake breakfasts. I didn't remember any of it, but there I was, smiling and loved. And something in me softened. "I'm angry," I admitted quietly. "I don't know who took me or why, but I grew up thinking nobody wanted me. And now I find out I had a dad who cared. It's a lot." Thomas sat across from me, his eyes damp. "You have every right to be angry. I failed you once, Grace. I can't change that. But if you'll let me, I'd like to be here now. For you, for Emily. I can't undo the past, but maybe I can help with the future." Something in his tone, humble, almost pleading, broke through my walls. "Emily," I said softly, glancing toward the bedroom door. "She doesn't even know what a grandparent is supposed to be like." He smiled faintly. "Then let me show her." The next weekend, we arranged to meet at a park near my apartment. I was nervous, half expecting it to feel forced or awkward. But the moment Emily saw Thomas, something clicked. Kids have a way of knowing who's safe. She walked up to him, curious, and asked, "Are you really my grandpa?" Thomas knelt down, his voice soft. "If you'll have me, sweetheart, I'd be honored to be your grandpa." Emily grinned and hugged him like she'd known him forever. Watching them together did something to me I can't fully explain. It was like a knot in my chest finally loosened. From then on, Thomas didn't push. He simply showed up, dropping off groceries when he knew I was struggling, inviting us over for family dinners, helping Emily with her science projects. He even offered to pay for me to finish my certification program, something I'd abandoned years ago when life got too heavy. One evening, as we sat at his dining table, Emily curled up next to him with a book. I felt tears sting my eyes. "You're really trying," I whispered. Thomas reached across the table, his hand covering mine. "I lost you once, Grace. I won't waste this second chance." Months passed, and what started as cautious meetings turned into something I hadn't dared to dream of. Family dinners, shared holidays, laughter-filling rooms I never thought I'd step into. Clara, his wife, welcomed us without hesitation, and even Timothy and Vanessa seemed thrilled to have a big sister. For the first time in my life, family wasn't just a word, it was a feeling. The moment that sealed everything came on Emily's 11th birthday. Thomas handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a necklace, a heart-shaped pendant engraved with 3 names: Grace, Emily, Thomas. Emily squealed, throwing her arms around his neck. "I love it, Grandpa." I pressed my fingers against my lips, overwhelmed. That pendant wasn't just jewelry. It was a promise, one I'd waited my whole life to hear. "You belong." That night, as I tucked Emily into bed, she whispered, "Mom, are we happy now?" I smiled through tears. "Yeah, baby, we're happy now." Later, I stood by my bedroom window, looking at the old key pendant resting on my nightstand and the new heart pendant in Emily's room. One represented the life I'd lost, the other, the life I'd finally found. For years, I believed family was something other people had, something I wasn't allowed to want. But now, I knew better. Family isn't perfect or painless, but it's worth fighting for, even when it takes 26 years to find it. Sometimes, life takes everything from you and leaves you with nothing but questions. And sometimes, it gives back more than you ever dared to hope for.